Hi, in this screencast, I'm going to show you how to get data from a Google Sheet and then into a JavaScript file. And then you can read it and then you can do whatever you like with that data. So the first thing that we are going to understand is, let's say you have a Google Sheet link, whatever sheet. So here I have a sheet which has, some instructor names and their department codes and their profiles, research profiles. So I have all this information over here. What I want to do is I want to read it from Google Sheets and then print it on my web page. So let's see how we can do that. Now, first of all, you need to have a link for whatever you are reading. So the link will be provided to you in your project. But here you can actually, if you are doing it for the first time, you can actually open any Google Sheet and publish this on the web. And once you publish it, like for example, if I do it like this with a CSV file, I will get a link for that Google Sheet, and I can use that link to import or read information from this Google Sheet. Okay, so let's do that. So I'm going to create a new file here, and I'm going to call that file, let's say G Sheets or G import, whatever you like. It's an HTML file because I'm going to write it in HTML, okay, in JavaScript, sorry. So I'm going to call it import Google Sheets. Okay. Now here, as we already decided, let's say for example I have an empty table here. I don't have anything inside the table. I just created an empty table. I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm just going to create an empty table and then I'll write my script tag, which is the place where I write my JavaScript. Now inside this JavaScript, first of all, if you remember, I want to use that Google Sheet URL. So I'll say I'll get that URL, whatever the URL is, and I'm going to save it inside a variable called URL. Okay, so I have saved this inside this URL. Now the next thing that I would like to do over here is I will get the table variable, let's say table, because I'm going to add my information, whatever I received from the Google Sheets, into the table on HTML page so I can see the output. So I'll say var table, I'll say document dot query selector, and then this is my table, right? This is the table that I have received. Now to get that data I have to use AJAX. So to do AJAX, where I have to create my XHR or XML HTTP request object. XML HTTP request. Okay. And then the next thing that I would like to do is I'm going to write my XHR, sorry, not XHR dot on ready state change. This is my callback function. That is, once I receive that information, I have to do something with it, which is I want to show it on my page. I will have to show it on the table page. So that I'll just simply say function, and then inside here I will if XHR dot ready state is equal to 4 and XHR dot status is equal to 200. 200, right? Once I do this, then I can, for example, whatever I receive from the file, I will have to do something with it. Now, first of all, whatever I receive from the page, I want to read it, right? I want to read it and I want to understand it. Now, the thing that I'm receiving is a CSV file. You remember that previously when I was showing you in the first session about we can receive it as a JSON file, so we can use json.parse to understand something. But here I'm receiving it as a CSV file. So to read it inside JavaScript, I have to first convert it from CSV into a JavaScript object. Now, it is not that easy, so I'm going to use an external library to do that job for me. And that library is a very well-known library. It's called Papa Parse. It's called papaparse.com. Okay, so this is a good library that we can use to parse the CSV file into JavaScript. So we can download it and we can import that file. So let's download the file. It will be a zip file. Let's see. Yes. and now it's downloaded. I'm going to open it and I'm going to copy that file over here. So I'm going to say copy that file into my folder, whichever this folder is, which is JSON PHP, which is I'm working in, right? And then I'm going to unzip the file. Now inside this, it has a lot of things available, but I'm only interested in one thing, which is just JavaScript file. The others I don't want to bother with that. So I'm just going to copy this JavaScript file and then go back. And you don't need the whole thing, okay? I just need the JavaScript file, which is my Papa Parse.js file. I can simply delete this once I have used this file, and then I have to import it. Whatever file I'm using, I have to import it in my JavaScript page. So let's go back to our page here, and we have to import it. How do we import it? Just simply write, over here the script tag, and then say src equal to that, the name of the file wherever it is, and then just close it. So that's mean now I have imported the Papa Parse file inside my JavaScript page. Now I can use it. So there is now I can use the services which are provided by Papa Parse, and that's how do we use it? It's just simple. We say Papa and then say dot parse, and then we pass on the response, which is the CSV file. So we say xhr dot response text, right? So this is what we receive as my CSV file, and I'm using parse, and I have to store it somewhere. So I'm going to call it var and then call it data. Okay, so now I have received the data and I have stored that data inside this data. Now I don't know what the data looks like, so I will understand how it looks like first before we can add it to the table. So let's do one thing, because I don't know how it looks like. So let's do console.log and print out the data and see how it looks like. So before it works, we have to first of all open the request, which we are going to make a GET request to the URL, which is that URL. Now, since whenever you use simple URL, we saw that in the class when we were using with JSON APIs, that we will run into a problem of CORS. So to avoid that error, we use something with the help of HTTPS and say CORS dash anywhere dot Roku app .com and then say slash, and then I can pass the URL, whatever URL I have. So it will, the CORS issue will be bypassed. And then I say true, so AJAX request, and then finally I will just have to say send. That's it. That's all I have to do over here, and that's it, right? Yes, that's it. Okay, so now I have opened it, I have done this, and then I will send the request, and whatever I receive, I just want to print it out in the console. So I'm going to save this file and then just run it. How do we run it? We just double click it, because we are not using PHP, we're just using HTML, right? So if I double click, it should run. So if I double click, it opens in the browser. It does nothing, it doesn't show anything because I haven't displayed anything. I'm displaying it in my console, say all, and you can see that the data that I'm receiving is actually, it's an object of three things. It has data inside it, which is an array of items, and then it has errors, and it has some meta information. So the data here is each row. So each row, it's a multi-dimensional data, which means it's like a table. So the first row here is the first ID, and the second the item here inside. You can see that each row is inside its own item, its own line, right? So now I know that it's data, and inside the data I have another attribute called data itself. Okay, so how do I get that? So my data is data inside data, right? So because I'm already storing it in data, and the value is inside is in data. So what we would like to do is, because I don't want to type data.data every time, so I can simply say var contents equal to data.data. Okay, it's just to simplify it. You can use data.data every time you like it, but this is much more easier to do. And now, since you remember it's an array of, it's a multi-dimensional array, two-dimensional array. So I will have to use a for loop for where I in contents. This is what I have to go through, and it have to go one by one in the line, right? So I have to create a row and then add that row to my table one by one. So first of all, I will create a row, the opening tag of the row, you remember that, tr, right? And then I'm going to add the items in that row. So plus equal to, and then I would say, because everything inside the tr is a td. So it starts with a td, and then I'm going to add the data from it. So I'll use contents of I, and the first column, which is 0, right, plus, and then I will close the column, close the data item. Okay, so this is the first one, and then I will do the other one, which is row again, row plus equal to the second data item, which is the second item, right, and then I'll say plus contents of I and 1, and then I'll close it, slash td. Okay, and then I can simply copy it because I'm repeating the same thing, right? I'm repeating the same thing because there are 3 columns. If you remember, there are 3 columns in my sheet that I'm importing. So I'm going to say 2 over here. Okay, and then I'll close my row, say row plus equal to slash tr, and then once I close it, I want to add this row to my table. So I'll say table dot inner HTML, and then I'll say plus equal to row. Okay, so I'll add this row to the table, inside the table, and that's it. So it will keep on adding the row to the table, and then once it is done, it will finish it. So I'm going to remove this console because I don't need it anymore. I'm going to just simply call my value file. It will come here as a CSV file. You remember we exported it as a CSV file. This is, you can see this is output is a CSV file from the Google Sheets. And then I'm going to use this Papa Parse library to parse the CSV file into a JavaScript array. And then I'm using that array here in the loop, reading one by one the items inside each row for each column, and then displaying those columns row by row. So each time I'll create a new row and add the contents and show it inside the table. This is my table. Okay, so let's save this and let's go back to our page that we open. Okay, let's close this because we don't need this anymore. And then we will just simply refresh this page. Okay. It will take some time, and you can see that whatever was in the Google Sheet, this was the Google Sheet, remember, this was my Google Sheet. This was my Google Sheet, all the data with 3 columns, which is now currently here. You cannot see because our table is not very neat, so we can simply go over here and say table border equal to 1. Okay, save this, simply say refresh. And you can see that now I have the same things that I just saw. Everything that is now imported from that Google file, Google Scholar page. So now you can import anything from a Google Sheet page into your JavaScript page, and you can display it on your HTML page. So this is how it looks like. Simple. You just have to use the library and then import that data into that library. Using that library, I will parse that CSV file into a JavaScript array, and then I can use that array as however I like it. Okay, so that's it for this session.